Welcome to Live Well, Dream Big. I'm Suzanne Monroe, founder of the International Association of Wellness Professionals, where I've been teaching people how to live a life of wellness, tap into their passion, and go for their dreams for over 15 years. I believe living well and dreaming big starts with ourselves. This podcast will show you how to create a healthy, holistic life, empower your mindset, follow your dreams, and make a big impact. Let's dive in right now. Welcome back to Live Well, Dream Big. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode. Today, we're talking about sleep. It's one area of our health that, if it's not in balance, can affect almost every other area of our health and our life. And maybe you know what I mean. If you've ever had a bad night's sleep, or maybe you suffer from ongoing sleep problems, you feel low energy, and then, you can't get your work done. Next thing you know, you're snapping at your family members, and then you're reaching for pick-me-ups. And it's kind of this vicious cycle. On top of all that, sleep deprivation is at an all-time high. So this is an important conversation I'm having today, and I'm joined by Mollie McGlocklin, who is a sleep expert and the creator of Sleep is a Skill, a company that helps people optimize their sleep. This is such an informative conversation, so make sure to listen in. It's full of tips and tools you can start using today, whether you're someone who's had a bad night's sleep once in a while, or you just haven't slept well in years. So thanks for being here and tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to today's episode, Sleep is a Skill. I'm super excited today to be here with Mollie McGlocklin, who is the creator of Sleep is a Skill and the host of her own podcast, the Sleep is a Skill podcast. Sleep is a Skill is a company that optimizes people's sleep through a unique blend of technology, accountability, and behavioral change. So after navigating her own insomnia while traveling internationally, Mollie created what she couldn't find: a place to go to learn the skill set of sleep. And with a background in behavioral change from the nonverbal group, she became fascinated with chronobiology and its practical application to sleep, and really our overall experience of life. So knowing the difference between a life with sleep and without, she's now dedicated her life to sharing the forgotten skill set of sleep. Hey, Mollie, welcome to Live Well, Dream Big.
Thank you so much for having me today and for that introduction. Really, really appreciate it.
Well, I'm super glad you're here. As I said, it's such an important wellness topic, and we're about all things wellness here. And really, if you're not getting a good night's sleep, it affects every area of your life and your health. So it's so important. I'm just so glad we're talking about this. And funny story, ironically, last night, I didn't sleep well. I had like a quote unquote bad night's sleep. And I'm usually someone who sleeps quite well. I love sleep. But once in a while, though, I have a night where I can't get to sleep. And usually it's someone or something that wakes me up, which happened last night. But I laughed to myself instead of getting frustrated, because I was thinking, all right, we're going to be having this conversation today. So of course it was just serendipity. Like, what the heck? Bad night's sleep.
If I had a nickel at this point for every, podcast interview or workshop or what have you, where someone says that exact same thing, there's like, okay, what are the chances that in prep for this, I would have slept, gotten X, Y, and Z number of hours. So totally hear that. And
that's funny. I thought it was just me. Okay.
Yes. Well, my commitment is definitely to provide some takeaways that we can all have to hopefully bring in some new tools when those things do happen, which they will happen periodically. So the more we can kind of have in our back pocket of ways to respond newly to that can really be empowering.
Well, I can't wait to hear about it. But I'd love to start out just hearing a little bit about your story. As I kind of read your bio there, it sounded like you were having some insomnia, traveling. But what led you to be doing, what you're doing today, being a sleep expert and helping people to really get a better night's rest?
Yeah. I think my story is quite relevant to our conversations for a couple of reasons. One, just speaking to the mission around this conversation around sleep being a skill. Certainly when leading up to my bout with insomnia, how I related to my sleep was, I was living in the middle of Manhattan, serial entrepreneur, burning the candle at both ends, stressed to the max. And my sleep was really, I related to it with kind of fixed labels of how I would think about it. It would be, I'm a short sleeper, I'm a night owl, I'm a bad sleeper, it's in my genes, it's this, that, and the other. A lot of just kind of, labels that had not a lot of maneuverability. It's just kind of the way it was. And that's how I thought about it. And it wasn't, and over the years, I got more extreme with my behaviors around my sleep. And so I'm going to bed later and later. I shared about I work with a lot of poker players. So I was swimming in this pool of people that are often going to bed much later than the average person and thinking that this is fine. So this is how I'm managing things. I'm not noticing that I'm getting more sick more often, or not correlating, not connecting. I had a period of shingles, in my late 20s, just a number of things that were popping up that were indicating that something was not working the way I was managing my health and my life. And yet I wasn't making the connections between that and my sleep, getting more anxious more often. And it wasn't until I started traveling internationally. My fiance and I had we're going to do almost the Tim Ferriss style life. And we're going to put everything in storage, take our businesses on the road and start traveling internationally. And we just were not ready for that. The amount of stress that we had, employees, just it all kind of correlated or culminated. And I went through this period of insomnia that I never experienced. It was, for me, my rock bottom moment in my life, that just all things were not working. And then to officially have days of virtually no sleep, it was a sense of I'm losing my mind. Like, this is not, it's not workable. I can't continue going on like this. And at one of my lowest points, I was in Croatia. I went to the doctors, just kind of in the state of desperation, like, hell, I don't know what to do. And I leave with a prescription of their version of Ambien. And in that moment, it was kind of like, all right, I got to figure this out. And that really began this whole quest to understand more about this area that I had really not done due diligence in. And on the flip side of that, now it's just a whole new world. We have the weekly podcast, newsletter, community, online courses. We are now in hotels, luxury brand hotels, just, all of these different things got created out of this ability to understand that we really have so much power in this area to really put ourselves back in the driver's seat.
Wow, that's quite a story. And I always find it so interesting where sometimes you have a problem or a challenge that happens in your life. You don't know why it's happening, but then ultimately, like, you're able to bring it forth as like the work you're doing in the world and impact people. So that's like just in and of itself, like pretty amazing that you were able to turn something that wasn't going so well into something really positive.
Yeah. And I'm really grateful for it at this point. Back when it was happening, it felt very shameful and embarrassing and just like, oh my God, it would occur as the most basic kind of human capabilities to be able to sleep. And so I do get kind of that it's tongue in cheek to say this, to name the company Sleep is a Skill. And I really, really believe that in our modern society, it has become the skill set. Now, I get that if you were to go back in time and try to make this argument to, our ancestors thousands of years ago, it might have been a harder sell. And yet from today, we can get into some of the reasons, the way that many of us are living our lives. So just from a societal perspective, so many of the things that we're doing are outside of these rhythms of nature that we can speak to, that there are so many things we can actually do day in, day out that can help optimize this. And that is really where that skill set comes into play. And it's something that we have an opportunity to go back to the drawing board, kind of clean slate. And from that place of knowing kind of students' mindset of, okay, let's start from ground zero on sleep and understand what there is to learn. There's so much and so much more coming out, even in recent years, in this realm of chronobiology, really the science of time and the science of how time and how we manage our time affects our biology. And, the more and more we're learning about this, the more fascinating it gets.
Well, it does sound fascinating. And when when I found your website and your podcast, I'm like, sleep is a skill. And I kind of thought to myself, that's interesting. I'm excited to hear what this is about because, even you think about babies, you hear from, parents with newborns, some kids sleep really well. Others are, always having sleep problems. So I got to thinking, I'm like, are some of us just born bad sleepers and some are good sleepers? Like, is this a gene issue or is it really more about our environment? And what you're saying is actually a skill. So is it something everybody can develop?
Yes, great call out. So one, there certainly is that genetic component. We do some partnerships with the company Wild Health that is looking at, really helping for people to be able to pull in a bit more of this genetic component to optimize their health. So certainly there are elements there, and it's layered. So it might relate to whatever your ability to metabolize caffeine and the timing for that and what that does to your sleep differently than another person might have, or a genetic component to a trend towards staying up, to a particular time versus, staying up a bit later versus a bit earlier. So there are certainly those components, but I think many of us might not give or, understand how much we from our behaviors can influence this. So for instance, in my story, I was convinced I'm a night owl. Like I've always been this way. It's always going to be this way. And now, I rise with the sun. It's just like wild what's possible by making so many of these behavioral changes. So, and we can get into what that looks like, but I think it's all coming from one of the big things that we do with Sleep as a Skill is this conversation around circadian rhythm entrainment. So what that is all about is, as a reminder, of course, our circadian rhythm is this rhythm that we function on as human beings that on around a 24-hour cycle. We're diurnal creatures, meaning that we're meant to be active during the day and at rest at night, and with varying timelines of what that looks like for everyone. But, the facts remain that our circadian rhythm exists on the spectrum. So you can either kind of be on the weak side of your circadian rhythm or the strong side. And certainly to use myself as an example, when I was struggling with my sleep, I was very much on the weak side of that circadian rhythm. My timing for my sleep was all over the place. My meal timing was all over the place. My light timing, my darkness timing, exercise timing, thought timing, a number of these timing things that we can get into and what those look like were all thrown out of whack. So my body had difficulties, really being able to predict what time it would be doing certain things and when, and this affects all kinds of things, hormonal, kind of balance, glucose, the cardiovascular health or productivity. We struggle to find an area of life that's not impacted, with that consistent regularity and poor sleep function.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. You mentioned like so many different things. I felt like these light bulbs going off. I was like, because you're like, yeah, circadian rhythm. But then what you're saying is there's many things that have their own rhythm and kind of their own timing too. I'd love to hear more about that, because it sounds like it's not just about, being up with the sun and going to sleep at night. You said thoughts in there too. And I'm curious to learn more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So from kind of the top down, literally, essentially how this kind of functions is we have our super chiasmatic nucleus, which is located directly behind our eyes, a little small area in the brain that acts as kind of our master clock. And then that's communicating with our peripheral clocks in virtually every cell in our body, then with the aim of keeping us on time. And this timing, we're only more and more discovering the importance of this in recent years, and certainly trickling into the mass conversation. And seeing some of the ill effects of this when we are not living in alignment with this, and we're not then getting as quality of sleep. Many of you might have seen how much now we're seeing a lot of reports around link ups with neurological issues. So looking at neurodegenerative issues. So Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, linked with some of this living outside of these rhythms and getting poorer sleep quality, seeming to be correlated with some large scale studies. So there's, really some clear implications. But with that, what we can do is start to understand that there are a number of things that will impact this. So back to this circadian rhythm entrainment, it's this concept that you can entrain to strengthen that circadian rhythm. So if you've been hanging out a bit more on that weak side, we can start to move ourselves over to that stronger side of your circadian rhythm. Examples of this are like the friends that you go out with, and you might all go out a bit on the later side of things, but they're always the ones that wake up at the same time that they always do the next morning. We want to be like that friend, or maybe that's you. So if that is you, fantastic. So we're going to talk about some other things that you can do to further optimize. But the top one, the most impactful thing, and these are known as Zeitgebers, which is just means time givers for the body. The first one is light. And so we're really beginning to more and more understand the importance of really being outside as much as possible. I know I see Debbie Johnson outside. Fantastic. The more we can set up our lives to have a bit more of that throughout our days, but particularly if you're questioning, well, I got a busy life. There's only so much time I can get myself outside. Always aiming to anchor it. It's called sunlight anchoring on the first half of your day. Because the first bright shot of light that gets into your eyes, so you want to make sure that you don't have sunglasses on or anything that could hinder this. But you want to get that bright shot of light into the eyes, which again is connected directly to that suprachiasmatic nucleus. And that is going to help reset that clock every day. There is an averaging effect. If, one of the days out of the week or periodically you can't be out there as long as you would like or whatever, there is that averaging effect. But to really make this consistent, you want to do this ideally, some of the call outs are around 20 minutes each morning, but it's very much a variability element of where you fall on the globe, what the conditions are outside. You can use something called Light Meter. It's a free app that will measure the lux in your environment. And you can very quickly see that even on a cloudy day, you're going to get much more light most of the time outside than you would with anything indoors. So you want to start to bring that in. And if you say, well, I'm right next to a window, so that's fine. What we find in certain studies is that it still seems to cut the ability to reset that master clock from behind a window because it cuts that full spectrum. In certain studies, it's looking at anywhere from 50 to 100 times longer to reset that master clock if you're getting that light from behind a window. Don't get me wrong, it's still preferable to being in a, windowless room, but it's not going to be the same as really truly getting yourself outside. So that would be one of the first things that I would mention to start rearranging the scheduling of your day so that you can get yourself out there each day. If you're in your car, simple sort of physics element of this is just rolling down your window because that changes the light that's coming through the window by pulling that down. Then that actually, you're not having to deal with that fragmentation. So you're getting that full spectrum light. So just different little ways that you can set yourself up powerfully to get that dose. And that really starts to cause a ripple effect. Not only are you dealing with vitamin D and how that's a precursor to serotonin, which is a precursor to melatonin. So it's very much in this conversation of your ability to get great sleep later on that night, but it's also a real cause and effect. So from whatever time you get that bright shot of light, there seems to be a bit of a proverbial background countdown of then when you'll get tired later on the evening. So you can also do the strategy the other way. If you're going to be traveling internationally and you need to stay up later, a lot of my poker clients, if they've got really important tournaments and they know they need to stay up later, we might actually strategically delay when they get that bright shot of light because they want to be more active in the evening. So really get that there's this cause and effect. So that can be a helpful way to kind of dose yourself, if you will.
Well, it's funny because you talk about this and people might say, oh, yeah, sure. I've heard that. I should be doing that. But the days go by and maybe you're just not doing it, right? So it's like such an important reminder, but then you don't really, maybe you don't integrate it. You don't remind yourself. Are there certain things you do to remind yourself, okay, I got to keep doing this because I want to be able to stay in balance. I want to stay on course. And I love what you said, master clock. We all have a master clock.
Yes, absolutely. And to your point, I'm so grateful that it's starting to trickle into the conversation a bit more, that we're starting to hear this more, that, okay, yeah, I've heard this sun thing. And then it's the behavioral element of it. How do we get ourselves to do it? Over the years after I had my whole sleep breakdown, we did actually get that figured out, and then did continue on to travel for another 3 years after that, leading up right to the pandemic, and now beginning to travel again. Knock on something, it seems to be happening quite a bit more, unless anything else comes our way. But so what I've tried to do for myself is even kind of like even a door frame method of wherever you might be, whether it's a hotel, or you're going upstairs, or you're just kind of going outside, like, passing yourself through that door frame. And even, like we have a kind of a terrace area that we can go. So sometimes if I do have like a busy day or whatever, I'm kind of just like hanging out on that door frame to just get myself to know that it doesn't have to be that big of a deal. You can still get that light in your eyes, but ideally that's kind of for a busy thing, or if you're traveling. But ideally, if you can set yourself up powerfully so that you're outside, and it's part of your morning routine, so my fiance and I really like, we bring, our morning coffee outside, and we kind of sit out there, and we'll have our breakfast out there. And, sometimes we look pretty weird as it gets cold, colder, then we're like all bundled up like burritos. But whatever it takes to get yourself out there, because I think the important thing about this is, when we say, so many of us we're struggling with our sleep, or many people that we know are struggling with our sleep, it kind of becomes like, well, that's how life is. And there's stats behind this. So the World Health Organization in 2016 found that the average person in the West was spending on average about 90% of their day inside. Now, the reason that this is important is that so many of these things, these time givers that we're speaking to entrain your circadian rhythm, come from being outside, being out in nature. So now that many of us are living a bit more like zoo animals, arguably, and inside and devoid of these cues that we can speak more about, that's part of the problem that is relating to this inability to kind of have a sensing of knowing what time it is and what our body needs to be doing and when. And by the way, that was in 2016. That was before a lockdown, before a lot of changes from more remote working. So you could make the argument that many of us are even spending more time inside. So what we need to do to interrupt that is to really create what we would have been naturally exposed to, thousands of years ago, which would have been these elements so very, very clearly. So we spoke to light timing being so important. So you want to get as much of that dosing of light throughout the course of the day, looking to those lux readouts on the apps, seeing how much you can get of that. You want a very high amplitude of bright light exposure throughout the course of the day. You really ideally don't want to be wearing some of these, I've seen some clients wearing darker blue blockers during the day, and that can be confusing for the body because we want to be getting as much of that full spectrum light, ideally, which does include blue light during the day. So you want to get that with that high amplitude, but then in going into the evening, you want to markedly drop the amount of light that you're exposed to. I had an anthropologist on the podcast that would argue for his students every single year, and very few people would take him up on this, which was to do the candlelight challenge. So that for at least 2 weeks, you are after sunset using nothing else beyond just candlelight for your lighting. And for the people that actually would do it, the few students that really would do that, they would often find, wow, I get tired way earlier. It's just so crazy. I'm getting, and I'm sleeping longer throughout the course of the night. I mean, there's just what feels like a small change can yield a really big difference in our melatonin production in the evening. So 1, you could play with that. 2, if you've kids or concerns around candles, you can do red lights. So we've got like red lights going on here. Different things that you can do to shift your environment on the front end. But then on the back end, this can make a huge difference in your sleep quality. So that's still in that domain of light. And then after that, temperature is one of the next ones. So you want to look at your ambient temperature. So if we think about this from an evolutionary perspective, if we were living outside, the sun would rise, and then with the presence of the sun, then the temperature would go up in the space. So these two cues together would tell your body like, okay, clearly this has got to be the start of the day. Now, many of us just keep, a same static temperature in our space, same static, light exposure. So by changing these and bringing more of this clear change, that can really help guide the body. But then we can get into some of the other things that further are nestled under temperature that affect your temperature, like that meal timing, exercise timing, thought timing, drug timing, like coffee, alcohol, THC, or others. Many of those things will also change that body temperature.
Well, I love it because you're like talking about going back to the time of our ancestors, and there's like this real sense of like, I'm picturing myself going around with candlelight tonight. But that and like this whole idea of Mother Nature really does heal. Like there's something to be said about how things were done, But my question for you around all that is like, is that really doable for people living in the world that we are today? I mean, it seems like it's a necessity because I know you talk about sleep deprivation being really at an all-time high. What's going on with sleep deprivation and this being such a big deal? Is it really simply because we've become so modernized and all these, we've changed our temperature, we've changed how we see light, and some of the things you're talking about?
Yeah, it's definitely a big topic. In 2020, insomnia was Googled, or keyword searches for insomnia were at all-time high, higher than any time we've been tracking these sort of keywords in the past. And certainly we can gather that there are some confounding issues to the possibly the why of that. But certainly layered in with there seems to have been, if you look at some of these graphs of keyword searching that people have looked for sleep help, sleep aid, sleep remedies, all of these, we see this really marked incline. And a couple of the things that this seems to be around. So one, I keep going back to this evolutionary element because of the fact that really in the experience of human history, the big change as it relates to sleep really came with Edison and this creation of the light bulb. Because with that creation, then suddenly we're able to have really 24-hour living. I'm in two of the worst places for this, Vegas and New York City, where certainly you can make your own hours, whatever you want, you can have it. And yet this was something that we really could not do in the past to the same degree. Because even if you were to try to defy, kind of these normal rhythms, it would often be expensive to have sources of, lanterns, candles, fire, whether financial cost or economic costs or labor costs. So it was something where most of us weren't living on that 24-hour rhythm. It'd be very odd, particularly day in, day out. And then the quality of that light is very different from fire or candle, which is much more warm based, because this kind of the Kelvin of the light affects the production of melatonin, our ability to produce melatonin or not. So when we our newer lights, especially then we saw it even more an uptick in the 80s when we started shifting over to more of these LED type blue and green based lighting versus the incandescent lightings that we used to have a bit more in the past that were also a bit warmer on the spectrum. So we've seen this degradation of the type of light that's in our space from a kind of efficiency perspective or what have you, but it tends to be much more cooler in nature. So more that blue and green. And so if you're listening and being like, oh, who cares? It's just light. Like, what's the big deal? It really does make a huge difference. There's really interesting studies out of NASA that speak to the difference between static lighting, where you have that consistent lighting, like we're talking about throughout the course of the day, versus dynamic lighting, where you have really bright lights during the daytime and then markedly dim. We're talking like candles, essentially, is what they used in the NASA studies. And they would have a dynamic, a real marked increase in your ability to produce melatonin for that dynamic example versus just almost, there was a little blip just from a natural production of the inner melatonin, but much less marked than the dynamic. So if you get nothing else out of what I'm saying, really create that clear difference for yourself. And then over time, begin to see how that alone can make a big difference for your sleep, not only your ability to fall asleep, but also stay asleep. So if you're someone that has wake ups, this can be a strategy too.
So we have all these things that we used to be doing that we're not doing anymore. And you're kind of on a roll there. You were talking about the sun and like temperature. Is there anything else that like we need to make a change with?
Yes. Oh, 100%. Okay. So
we probably won't get to it all today either.
I know there's so many things. So at Sleep as a Skill, we really lean into, counter to the fact that I'm talking all about this evolutionary stuff, we also lean into technology. So we have every client wearing various sleep trackers. So no matter what they're all wearing right now, the Oura Ring, OURA, no financial affiliation, but just that's what they're wearing for sleep tracking. So time and time again, I just got off a client call right before this, and actually the same thing was on the topic. some of the most popular things that I see that make just such a measurable difference in people's sleep, often on the negative side of things, or if they take it out on the positive side of things, meal timing. So eating too late. And when we say that, you might say, oh, that's fine. I'm not eating right before bed. That's not me. But what's surprising is that if we can get our meal timing for many people, now this is bio-individual and you want to test this out and a number of things, but what we tend to find is that 4 hours or more before bed, stopping your last bite of food. So when we say first bite, last bite, it relates to this great book called Circadian Code with Dr. Sachin Panda, looking at the effects of the timing of your meal. So really that first bite signaling kind of the beginning of the day, and the last bite signaling a bit of the end of the day, moving into fasting, lowering your body temperature, and then helping to support getting improved sleep quality. So that first one of the meal timing, and it's looking what you can do to end that meal timing on the earlier side of things. For further tech, we have many clients also wearing continuous glucose monitors. So we did a kind of small focus group study looking at Levels Health, continuous glucose monitors, and Oura Ring wake ups. And we would find that when people would have big spikes in their glucose, but then really the concern would be the crash that comes after that, because when we have that crash, tend to be that release of cortisol and adrenaline. And then that tends to be those wake ups where you're like up now. And you might not be going back to sleep for a while. Those can often be glucose related. There's many reasons for wake ups, don't get me wrong, but that is a popular reason that we might not always connect. So just that meal timing is a very popular one. Then the second one I would say is often people are surprised by how much of a difference it can make is alcohol. And so, it's kind of, we are like, yeah, of course, it's not going to be great for sleep. But when you really see, if you're not tracking, if I'd highly suggest getting some sort of sleep tracker, whether it's the Whoop, Oura Ring, BioStrap. These are some of the ones that will give you some more readouts as far as heart rate variability, which tells you a lot about your ability to recover throughout the course of the night, heart rate, respiratory rate, body temperature, blood oxygen in some of them. You will see a whole picture of your health and what your sleep is looking like throughout the course of the night. And even one drink for many people, depending, and again, bio-individuality, more people are affected, differently at different times, or can handle that. But it's often surprising that even one drink, and we're talking hours before bed, can still show up in those numbers. So those are some very common things. But then we can also get into, of course, exercise timing. I think from a common sense perspective, we probably know that working out on the later side of things is going to affect, or might not be as advantageous as moving our exercise a bit earlier. But at the same time, exercise is so crucial. It is, if you do have certain times where you have it a little bit later in your day, you can kind of supplement with doing a bit of a cool shower after the fact. We're looking just to bring that body temperature down. And ideally, though, if you can move it on the earlier side, you play with it, because depending on your hormonal balance, like what your cortisol levels look like in the morning, and what they're looking like throughout the rest of the day, you can really align those nicely for yourself. So if you lean into some of these things for the exercise, the meal timing, the kind of low glycemic index food choices, so that we're regulating blood sugar, then we can get into some of the things like thought timing. Now, this was like often a lifetime struggle for many of us, where you might see that you are kind of thinking about or consuming things later on in the evening that are bringing a bit more of that sympathetic response. So doing a bit of that, thought timing audit and seeing, are there certain times when you're speaking with your partner about stressful things or bills or kids or whatever in the evening? How can we regulate that earlier on in the day? How can we start to notice if we're starting to intake articles, shows, what have you, that could bring about that stress response? From a tech component, we have people wearing the Leaf, LIEF, that measures continuously your HRV, your heart rate variability, and your heart rate. So you can see if you are going into a stress response at various times throughout the course of the day, change your breathing to modulate that stress response. But also we can see if you're someone that's trending towards more of that kind of going in the red, because it's color coded, in the evening. And so then we know that that's an area that we want to really kind of protect to help us deal with that stress earlier on in the day and really devote that evening time to kind of a wind down period.
I love this idea of all the thoughts. And I was just thinking back to a couple of years ago. My husband and I worked together. We're business partners. And sometimes at night we would just, it's finally quiet, kids in bed kind of thing. And we would get into conversations. And I would notice, oh, that was impacting my sleep. So we had to make a rule at our house. It's like, okay, 5 o'clock comes or whenever the end of the day. And like, we're not allowed to talk about these things anymore. Even if they weren't stressful, you're right. They impact your sleep. And I was just reading something kind of tangential about this is that, if you're an empath or like a highly sensitive person, you see something, you talk about something like you're saying, sometimes you almost make it like it's a reality. So if you're watching something on television at night, even though logically, okay, this isn't happening to me, you can start kind of taking that into your field almost. And that's what I kind of hear you saying, these thoughts, these things we're seeing, we're doing, if we're doing them late at night, they're going to impact really us coming into this state of restfulness.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really can be a fascinating thing because to your point, maybe you weren't even talking about things that are overtly stressful or, argumentative or anything. It was just can fall in the domain of activating. So it's just a bit more, waking up of your brain and changing that kind of state that you're in. And even this can fall into the excited domain. So it can be, oh yeah, I can't wait for the vacation and this and that. And, you might go down this path where suddenly you're like, what just happened? Now it's like an hour later than my normal bedtime. I got myself all wound up. So sometimes it doesn't even necessarily have to be quote unquote negative. So what we're looking to really bring about in our evenings is a lack of novelty in a lot of ways and not the entire evening. I'm saying like have this really sad, boring life. Instead, we're looking to, in the particularly just protecting a bit of that hour to 90 minutes before bed. Now, this is not a hard and fast rule. If you're dealing with a lot of stress, you might need a little bit more time to wind down. It might depend on the person, but giving yourself kind of that runway where it's not the time where, oh, let's put on the new Netflix show. It's not the time to then pull out, I don't know, some new textbook and start thinking of all these new things. It's really just a time for constants and, you wash your face and kind of the same way you do with kids. And we bring, it's pajamas and we turn on the lights and we do all these same sort of things. We want to do that for ourselves.
That totally makes sense. And, I just love how you're, on one level, we're like, okay, technology can really disrupt your sleep. But yes, technology can also help us to get this bigger picture of what's really going on. So that really makes me think about, if you're someone out there who's listening and you're like, okay, I'm not sleeping well. I mean, do you have to start doing all these things? Is there a roadmap? Like, how do you know exactly what's impacting your sleep? Where do you get started? I mean, you've given so many gems so far. It's like, okay, what do I do?
What do I do? Yeah, exactly. So I highly suggest that people start with the tracking. So if this was years ago and you went into to go get help with your sleep, often the suggestion would be to keep a sleep diary. So if bare minimum, if you're really against tech, you could begin there. And what you'd be logging is when you're going to bed, when you're waking up, how many wake ups did you have? How long were you awake throughout the course of the night? What were your inner dialogue? What were your responses to this wake up? Were you really frustrated or were you just kind of leaning into acceptance and this is okay? And then how did you feel when you woke up in the morning? You kind of be going through some of those things and logging those. But we're in a point where a lot of this can all, one, get automated for you with these sleep trackers. But two, they often expose things that even just that reflection period might miss. So because sleep is such a gray area of a lot of questions, and, if you even think back to last night or last couple nights, you're like, well, I don't know. I went to bed around this time. I think I had that wake up at some time when the light was sort of weird. Like, there's a lot of gray area in that recalling. Whereas these trackers now, there is a kind of rule of thumb with how you think about these right now. The hand and wrist-based trackers, the sleep staging qualifications are not the best. So not, if you are tracking and you've been really concerned about some of the amount of deep sleep you're getting or the REM, they don't hold up particularly well to polysomnograms. If we look at the difference between what their algorithms are reading out and what you would get in, say, like a sleep lab. However, they do tend to be pretty good at knowing, are you asleep or are you awake? Just that kind of binary element of things. So it helps kind of take care of like around what time do you fall asleep, around what time do you wake up, but then also how many wake ups do you have throughout the course of the night? So I've had clients that have been able to see that it looks like they could be a candidate for having sleep apnea. And then they do get tested and they do find that they have mild, moderate, or severe sleep apnea just based on some of the readouts from these trackers. Beyond that, they can also measure things like, so for women that are of menstruating age, then you can see and track your cycle with some of these trackers that have the body temperature readouts, like the Oura Ring, and Whoop Band is adding that on as well in their new 4.0 model. So with that, you can see which phase are you, or what's part of your cycle that you're in throughout the month, and that can be really, really helpful for women because you will have a measurable change in that body temperature, and you often, many of us are more inclined to have difficulties in sleep, particularly in that luteal phase when our body temperature is higher. So there's a lot of information that can come out, and it's not just for women of menstruating age, of course. Then you can also, for men, they can see changes, or for women post-menopause can certainly see changes in their own body temperature. And signal either getting sick. This has been a lot more getting in the news with things like, COVID and what have you. So you can really have some of those signalings if something is changing in advance. But then also that heart rate variability ends up being really, really valuable to also logging just even stress levels. So if you are really breathing differently throughout a period of your life when you are more stressed, often that HRV number will go down, your respiratory rate will go up because you're tending to take more shallow, quick breaths. And then what's really cool is how you manage your stress and how you're managing your life throughout your days get mirrored in your nights. So that's a really important call out, because when you are, like, for instance, I had a client that was dealing with, she's, single, retired, and she really, really had these strong connections with her animals, and her dog had died, right? And we saw this massive drop in her HRV, really spike in her heart rate, change in her respiratory rate. And that's from something that is kind of one of those intangibles or challenging things to point to, is just grieving and kind of bereavement. So, there's lots of different things you can start to learn about yourself, but it can also be just so cool from a life hack perspective, because then you can start to notice, we might not see subjectively might have a sense, oh yeah, maybe I'm more stressed. But when you see those numbers, you're more likely often to take actions to help facilitate a shift in that. And it can really gamify this area.
Well, I really do love that, because it gives you like this insight into everything that's going on. I think in any area of wellness, like, you have to have that insight, you have to have that baseline. But too often people are just going to kind of these quick fix solutions, right? Without really having that bigger perspective. And of course, you've mentioned there's tons of gadgets out there, and there's so many supplements and solutions too, that people are just doing kind of more like quick fixes. What do you think about those things? Whether it's like melatonin or even CBD oil, valerian, like, should people be going to those quick fix solutions? Or do they really need to start with getting this bigger perspective and then going from there?
Yeah, good questions. So one top, I mentioned the tracking, highly recommend speaking there. Then once you see what is the deal? Like, what time are you averaging that you're going to bed? What time are you averaging that you're going to, that you're waking up? How many wake ups on average are you having? What is your body temperature elevated? Are there all of these things? We can kind of get a readout of where things are at now, and then start to make a difference for where we're going. So a couple of things with that top down, a couple of things that I've seen make a measurable difference sort of on the quicker side is you get that piece of tech. The other piece of tech I might recommend is cooling mattress pads. So whether it's Chili Tech or 8 mattress, and some of the different mattresses starting to include these in the mattress itself. But getting something along those lines can often be surprising, the difference that can quickly make as far as the readouts on your sleep. So that can be one. And for some people, it's more measurable than others. Another one, this one can often sound like what, but mouth taping, believe it or not. So some of you might know about that. Some of you might not. So mouth taping is you put, you can even do like 3M tape Or if you want it to be more kind of suited to the mouth, you can get it on Amazon. And that, if you are tracking, it can even be more empowering because then you can see what was your respiratory rate before this and then what was it after. If you suspect that you're snoring, you can use the Snore Lab. It's a free app that will measure the amount of snoring that you are snoring throughout the course of the night, give you a little grade. And then once you add on the mouth taping, see did that grade measurably kind of improve so that you're snoring less if that is a concern. But even if you're not snoring, just mouth breathing in general, there's a great book by James Nestor called Breathe that speaks to this really profoundly, and it's gotten a lot of traction, is they can really measurably change the quality of that sleep. So that can be one thing you could test. I do recommend giving yourself around a week because it is sort of a weird practice. It takes some time to get used to. But when you do that over time, that can really help that sleep quality. Then we want to, of course, lean into the light timing, the darkness timing, shifting the temperature. So if you can make your temperature warmer in your space during the day and cooler at night, if you have that ability to change that in your space, that can often be really powerful as a signal. You can lean into temperature therapies. So whether it's like heat therapies or cold therapies. So traditionally we'll have people do more cold therapy in the morning hours, and it can give you a bit of a dopamine hit too, and a bit of that cortisol, and kind of be in that alignment with that cortisol pulse that we want to have in the early part of the morning. And then moving into more warm temperatures in the evening. So like saunas, hot showers, hot baths, and counterintuitively, when you get out of those, then you tend to drop your body temperature cooler than you would without that intervention, sort of oddly. But you want to give yourself enough of a buffer time to bring that temperature down. So those are some of those changes. Blue blockers, red, orange, and red in the evening to help mitigate, but that won't kind of save the day. You still need to change your lighting environment too. So those are some of those changes you can make, but then the supplements, like you were speaking to. So often I save those for the very last because so many times we want to do the opposite and go straight to the supplements. But you can buy all these crazy expensive supplements. And if you're not doing these foundational behavioral things, it's often just be kind of throwing money away. So one, the bioindividuality part is really important. So if you can get some of these labs done. So I mentioned Wild Health, they're not the only element. That's just one group that we've often worked with to get, a really understanding of where you're at as far as on these various panels, to see if there are any deficiencies that would impact your sleep, either clearly, directly, or inadvertently. So looking at, iron levels, thyroid, mineral panels, there's a number of things that then can influence your sleep. So ideally, we want to be directly targeting what you're dealing with versus just, a kitchen sink approach. But some of the common ones that we seem to be more safe across the board seem to be, of course, I'm sure you've probably heard of magnesium, and particularly magnesium glycinate, threonate. Some of those can be helpful in the evenings, and even some people will take glycine separately to help lower that body temperature in the evening too. But so you can bring in some of these supplements in the evening. CBD, to your point, seems to be helpful for a number of people if they get that dosage right. So sometimes the lower side of CBD sometimes can be activating for some people. So moving into a bit more the higher dosage, but it can be tricky because you want to kind of find that Goldilocks effect. But it does seem to be promising for a number of things, even just from those internal clocks and kind of that resetting. They don't fully understand the why as much. Definitely need more studies on the CBD front. But I would definitely say, if you've been under the impression that THC can be helpful, we tend to find the opposite for that as far as sleep quality. Now, it can be similar to like alcohol, where it can often help us fall asleep, but the quality of that sleep might be, impacted. But this is where the individuality comes in. If you're dealing with chronic pain and you're up against, opioids or something like THC, obviously, there can be some real benefits to leaning into something natural like that. But if you get into this conversation, you're tracking, you can really see the effects based on what you choose to add into your practice. There's also companies like BioLoop that allow you to then kind of hook up your tech to their interface, and then you can track. You can say, all right, I'm going to start this new supplement. They say it's like the latest and greatest for sleep. Let's see. And so let's measure for the next 30 days or what have you, and see, is there a measurable improvement in my sleep or not? So that can be another way to, really get a sense of, is it working or not?
Well, and I really like how you said bio-individual a couple times
Yes.
in our conversation, because you're right. There's so many different options out there. So there's gadgets, there's solutions, there's technology, but none of it really matters unless, you're doing the baseline stuff that you're talking about, finding out what's really going on for you, and the fact that different things work for different people, obviously. So I think that's such an important point. And I know this has been such a fascinating conversation so far. I want to switch gears here and go to our coaches talkback section. But before I do, for those who are listening that are like, okay, I'm furiously taking notes. This is amazing. There's so many tips you've shared, Mollie. Tell us a little bit about the Sleep is a Skill podcast, because I know that's such a great resource for people who are like, okay, I definitely want to improve my sleep. I want to keep learning from you. I know you've interviewed tons of experts on this topic. Tell us a little bit about the podcast.
Sure. Yeah. The Sleep is a Skill podcast. We every week release a new episode looking at whether sleep experts or new sleep tech, or various things that we can do to help optimize our sleep. So we get that out every single week. We also every single Monday send out a weekly newsletter for 160, like 7 Mondays or something in a row. So every Monday you'll get that, and that will also include a bit of that podcast. But we also try to really provide the latest in sleep news in there, sleep experiments. So we'll have different like charts and graphs from different clients of what they've been, putting in to change their sleep, and any kind of noteworthy, interesting things. Like just the other week, we had someone that just did a 10-day Vipassana training, and it was super cool because then after, for subsequent weeks, their sleep just improved measurably, the total sleep number, so some of those just out of the box things, or just noteworthy changes that you can measurably look to, we include in there too. And then with Sleep is a Skill, at the website, we aim to have a lot of different free things that you can do to take action with your sleep. So we have a sleep assessment that gives you targeted information back about your sleep, downloadable PDF to how to optimize your bedroom, low tech, high tech. And then, those different options to sign up for the newsletter or podcast. So just, a lot of free ways to improve this area.
Well, thank you so much for creating that resource for everybody. We'll put the link below in the show notes. Let's switch gears, go to our coaches out there who are joining us live for our talkback session. And this is really amazing for coaches too, because while they can apply this own information to their life, they're working with clients who have all different types of challenges, but obviously people who have sleep issues too. So let's open up. If you guys got questions out there, we'll pop over to Eileen in a second. I want to start us off with one question coming in here from Sandra, who's asking about how to approach sleep problems with shift workers. Right here, we've got people that they're on a totally different rhythm. And Sandra works specifically with nurses. Are there practical tips for those that are, either always working nights or shifting between days and nights? I mean, maybe they really can't change that part of their life.
Yes, that's a huge area. So number one, we're super grateful for our shift workers because, they can really, they're handling a number of things at really important points of the night. And one of the things we want to know is that if it's rotating shifts or consistent shifts. So if ideally, if we can at all pull for having that consistent night shift versus the rotating, definitely want to do everything possible, because the rotating is where there's just no two ways about it. It impacts your health really, really measurably. And, it's listed as a possible carcinogenic to be a shift worker in general. By the World Health Organization, but not even counting rotating shifts, because that is akin to, traveling across the globe on a regular basis, depending on your frequency and cadence. So what do you do about it? One, there's a cool app called Time Shifter. Highly recommend if any of you are going to be traveling and shifting time zones. So it's really great for the travel, but they're also adding in, and it should be coming out very soon, new component for shift workers, which is really exciting. The UX UI is really beautiful. They use the same algorithms that they use with NASA to keep astronauts kind of on the same rhythm. So it will help you have this really cool readout of when should you be getting light exposure, to what degree, for how long. If you lean into things like melatonin, what time should you have those? When should you kind of be moving, eating? All of those things will be helpful there. But if you have a consistent time for your shift work, then you want to create this as a lifestyle. So you want to have this where 7 days a week, this is your time, versus many people will do that for part of the week and then they try to go back to kind of normal schedule that everyone else is on. Unfortunately, that can be very, very confusing to the body. So we want to make this like, this is your time. This is what we do consistently across the board.
That's great. It sounds like there's some amazing resources out there. Let's pop over to Eileen, who's out there. Give you a microphone. Hey, Eileen.
Hey, Suzanne. Thank you for picking me. And hi, Mollie. I think this conversation has been great. It's been so fantastic. I've been also diagnosed with insomnia since 19, and I had it for many, many years. And finally, my body gave out. So it took me a while to reset my body clock and my circadian rhythm. And I did some of the things that you mentioned, is going out in the morning and getting that sunlight, not wearing sunglasses, making sure that I stopped wearing sunglasses throughout the day just so my body can start recognizing that it's daytime. But and then I managed to get to sleep to 8 hours, 7 hours, and I'm sleeping okay. But then I can't seem to fall asleep early. It kind of resets itself back. What is happening? Why am it resetting back to the old time frame? I want to get back to my old time frame, and it's like a struggle.
Yeah. Well, number one, I so acknowledge it sounds like you're doing lots of work to make a difference to changing and improving your sleep. So it sounds like you really made some progress there, which is amazing. Number two, even we found one of the first things that we do with clients, because we put people through a 90-day program to really optimize their sleep, get in this conversation. And one of the first things that we have them do is look at what are those labels that we create around our sleep, including, just the self-identification of I'm an insomniac. I'm this type of sleeper, that type of sleeper, because I completely relate. I mean, I had so many labels. It was wild. So we do have a lot of clients actually reading the book called The Sleep Book by Guy Meadows for when dealing with some of these difficulties around this sense of identifying as, okay, I'm an insomniac. I have all these difficulties with sleep. I've got a whole list of maybe years and years of evidence as to why this is the case. And so, our brain will be pulling to that. So that book can be helpful because instead of leaning into CBTI, which has CBTI is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which is the kind of main approach that most doctors will take to improve your sleep. And it might include sleep restriction therapy and different things to improve your efficiency. One area that for the anxious group seems, so people that are more anxious, and now that you're having all these rules about kind of what to be doing in bed and what you can't be doing in bed, and time restriction and getting all nervous. Oh my God, now I only have 3 hours left in bed and I got to get up. And so that anxiety can often fuel more difficulty. So another approach that that Guy Meadows and various other thought leaders lean into is called ACTI, so acceptance commitment therapy for insomnia. So you're leaning instead to a bit of acceptance around those times when you are having difficulty falling asleep and staying asleep. And we can even measure the difference that just that shift in thinking can bring, because we can help versus going into a spiral of, oh my God, it's going to happen again. Here we go. Then we have this uptick in our heart rate. We have a lowering in our HRV. And suddenly now we're going down this path of sometimes can be panic or upset or frustration or anger or whatever. So instead we want to start interrupting that. So that can be a powerful sort of North Star to pull back to. So it highly suggest that. And then also knowing
ACTI, I'm sorry. ACTI?
Yeah, ACTI, acceptance commitment therapy for insomnia. But the book is called The Sleep Book by Guy Meadows. That could be a place to start. And then beyond that, what we're looking to, really notice is that most of us will have different periods where our sleep will ebb and flow. So there can be these flare-ups at different points. And the more we can, resist the kind of Chinese finger trap where we're like fighting it and making it more stuck instead, just the like accepting that, then often that can help prevent a new spiral of here we go again. This is this big flare up or what have you. Often that can just be from the mental game proponent. But then you can also look at those lab works that we discussed and just making sure that there's nothing that we're missing in all of this. And then also with that tracking, you can also see, is there something different that you're doing, that has been shifting some of this that we might not have noticed without some of these numbers? So, oh, shoot, we've been starting to eat later. We've been starting to, stress about certain things. We're watching different things. There's so many of these that can bring the power back to us.
No, I thank you so much, Molly. I think, you're so right about that. You think that you've had a routine established and you get there, but you have to keep doing it because otherwise your body, and I know where I have made some changes, so I have to go back and do what I was doing before, but consistently, probably forever.
Yes, probably forever. And one of the things I really want to say is that I know this can sound ridiculous, but I've now begun to shift my thinking around when we do have difficulties with our sleep is really oddly being a bit of a gift because it tends to be a really great barometer of how are we managing our life and our stress and all the things that are coming our way and how we're relating to it. And if we are starting to have more of those flare-ups, it can be a sign that, okay, we've got to make some shifts. Maybe we want to start journaling, before bed and kind of emptying out the stressors. Maybe we need to have some important conversations with people that, are the thinking about it is stressing us out. Maybe we've gotten a little soft with we're not working out as much and we're not giving enough of that sleep pressure throughout the course of the day. I mean, there's so many things that we can start to notice. All right, like let's reassess. Let's go through kind of the mental checklist and see what might have shifted.
Thank you so much, Molly. I really appreciate your response. This is very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, good. I'm so happy.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Eileen. Great question and great answer. Wow. We could spend so much time, I think, just asking you questions, learning more. I'm so glad you have so many resources out there for people who really do want to learn more. So thank you so much. And I just want to thank you for being here today and joining me on Live Well, Dream Big. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Oh, well, I want to thank you. And I want to thank you for the work that you've been doing for all these years and creating this community and forum for people to really up-level their lives. I mean, it's just incredible. And I'm grateful to be a part of it.
Well, thank you so much, Molly. And thanks to everybody listening in today. We'll look forward to talking with you in our next conversation. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Live Well, Dream Big. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. And I want to invite you to take your next step toward living well and dreaming big by downloading the Live Well, Dream Big lifestyle book. It's the ultimate guide to becoming your best self and living life on your own terms. You can grab your complimentary copy by going to the link in the show notes or heading directly to iawpwellnesscoach.com/guide. That's iawpwellnesscoach.com/guide.